I am surrounded by little people. Here, look. These are my Taleoids. See? I guess people is a bit of a stretch, maybe. Depends on how you look at it. But small though they may be, their role in my life is great. I wasn't really built to get around, so I depend on them a lot to get things done. They can go where I cannot, see things I'll never be able to see myself. They play on the ductwork, making friends with the rare mouse or spider. They tamper with the machines, making mischief in the rust and the dust. They even sometimes leave the Foundry to explore the greater facility just beyond, although there are some compelling reasons not to do that quite so much anymore. They know a version of my world that I do not, that I cannot, being as large and as slow and as fixed in place as I am. They're like my own personal fairy folk. Maybe not the brightest, but certainly just as mischievous and, in their own way, just as mystifying. And I think it's sort of like that with most little people throughout folklore and fiction. I think they show you humans your own world from a very different angle. Did you know we make more than YouTube videos? It's true. Like this video about the magic of crafting living beings, or this one about angels and why artists render them in the ways that they do. You can see them all over on Nebula by signing up for the CuriosityStream Nebula bundle deal for just $14.79 a year. That's less than $125 a month. Visit curiositystream.com/TaleFoundry and use code TaleFoundry. It's funny. I never thought this way about the Taleoids until now. All this time, and this idea just slipped right by me. Like most things in my life, it was a piece of fiction that finally got me thinking about it. Terry Pratchett wrote a series of books about a young witch named Tiffany Aching. With the help of many strange characters and companions, as she grows older, she slowly learns what it means to be a witch. Among the most iconic of her companions are a group of tiny men called the Nakmik-Feagles, or the Wee Free Men. At first glance, you might wonder how they could be much help at all. They're only 6 inches tall, covered in so many tattoos that their skin looks blue, live underground in Barrow Hills, and, to complete the satire, speak in a thick Scottish brogue. But after Tiffany befriends a band of them in the first book, they become one of the most important influences in her life. Because Feagles don't just look different from humans, they also look different. They see the world in a different way. They can see ways into worlds adjacent to the one Tiffany knows and use what they call the cross-step to enter them. There's also another perspective difference that's decidedly less magical. They see the world around them as heaven. There's so much to steal and fight and drink there, it seems to them they must have been very good boys in the last world to end up here. They love it so much, in fact, they've named themselves after their home, the Chalk Hill clan, paying tribute to their little slice of paradise. As a witch, Tiffany has a great deal to learn from them. And as a person, I think you probably do too. This is far from a new concept for you, after all. We have plenty of examples of storytellers coming to this on their own. There's the Lilliputians from Gulliver's Travels, the classic English Tom Thumb, Hans Christian Andersen's Thumbelina, Mary Norton's The Borrowers. I think you can even sort of include the Lorax in this, although you'll have to keep watching for that one to make sense. This tradition of telling tales about tiny folk is one that goes way back. Probably most of the ones you've heard of, including the Nakmik-Feagles technically, come from the British Isles, which is likely in part because they are bursting with them. There you can find hobs, brownies, leprechauns, cluricons, pucks, and Robin Goodfellows of every variety. There are also many that I am sure I cannot pronounce, like Tylwyth Teg, Corrigan, Moonjavega, and all manner of other pixies. And of course, they have the famous Aes She, the people of the Mound. But go a little further afield and you find that these creatures are everywhere. Germany and Scandinavia have their dwarves, Slavic countries have all their many domestic spirits throughout the home, the ancient Greeks had their pygmies, some versions of the Japanese Kodama take the shape of little people in the trees, and this goes far deeper than children's stories. These are the spirits of the home, or of the locale, or of the wilderness, creatures of the trees, mountains, caves, cellars, fireplaces. They are gift givers and gift takers, often of the most mundane things imaginable, articles of clothing and heels of bread. They often trade in favors, but are as liable to do you as many kindnesses as cruelties. They are old gods demoted to the status of small things living in darkness. They are the land itself. Admittedly, none of those things are unique to little people. There are plenty of spirits and creatures throughout folklore you could describe in similar ways. But on top of all of that, these have the unique distinction of being you, but small, little people. And in an ever more individualistic world, ever more isolated and self-absorbed, I think the idea of shrinking the self has a certain allure. The inflated ego gets in the way, prevents one from seeing the world as it is outside the self. Maybe if you were smaller, you'd be able to see it just a little better. Maybe it would make the world bigger by comparison, more noticeable. I can't say for certain this is why humans are so fascinated by the idea of little people, but there are a lot of examples where that interpretation really sort of rings true. Versions of this you probably haven't heard of before. Like, for instance, in Australia. I wasn't able to find a proper name for them, but throughout the country there are tales from a vast variety of Aboriginal peoples, all describing magical little people. They vary from culture to culture, but they tend to be ugly, smelly, hairy little things. Nevertheless, their role is important. They seem to embody some of the more widespread Aboriginal Australian ideals about the laws of the land, like the right of access and the rules of avoidance. I can imagine how significant those things become when a people face colonization the way they have. It really makes a desire for a protective spirit like this all the more poignant to me, even though I've never been in their shoes. One specific tradition around the region of Darwin, Australia, envisions these little folk as friendly to people who have the right or the permission to be in certain places, such as sacred sites and ancestral lands. By the same token, they can be much less friendly to those who don't. Spin the globe over to North America and you can find tons of different takes on this idea. Much like Aboriginal Australian folk legends, many native tribes of this area have their own tales of little people. Again, details vary from culture to culture, but most often they're tied to specific places like a lake or a cave. At the Pryor Mountains, near the modern border of Wyoming and Montana, the Crow tribe have a particularly interesting story about a group of little people called the Nirumbi. They're said to be no more than 2 feet tall, but fierce warriors all the same, with great strength, sharp teeth, and stone-tipped arrows. Out of equal measures of fear and respect, the Crow have historically taken care not to travel through Nirumbi territory. But despite all their aggressive characteristics, the Nirumbi also represent a more empathetic, connective view of humanity's role in nature. They act as mediators between the people and the land, granting spiritual insight to individuals of their choosing. Usually, this decision is made by watching the sacred communal ritual of healing and prayer, the sun dance, and judging the participants. On occasion, they also grant such gifts to people who come into their lands humbled, prepared to fast. Far to the south, in certain parts of present-day Mexico where the ancient traditions of the Mayans and the Aztecs are still observed, there are tales of a creature called Alexoob or Chanaque, and again, probably butchering those words. Although they can be creatures of nature, taking up residence in places like forests and caves, they also have the distinction of bonding with man-made places as well. It creates an interesting tension within them, which I see reflected in the various versions of their name, translatable as either those who inhabit dangerous places or owners of the house. As tenants of your property, they can get up to a lot of mischief. When they want your attention, they're said to steal tools, drop your belongings on the floor, keep you up all night by screeching, general nuisances like that. But despite their mischief, they're worth it for the good fortune that follows. They can bring you prosperity. Their presence can help rain to greet your crops or keep your property safe from harm. In fact, in order to welcome them and their help, people have been known to build small houses for them on their property or in their fields. Otherwise, they tend to take up residence in hills near the farmer's home, and the farmers will bring them gifts like cigarettes, alcohol, and food. Sometimes they even help without being asked, filling perhaps a much older role as guardians of ancient ancestral ruins, scaring off would-be looters. The eyes and the teeth of the land, there to remind you of your place. The link between, inviting you to humble yourself before your world. The dweller in the dangerous place, offering you a trade. Dominion for sacrifice. own the land and be owned by it. And these are only a small sample of all the many little people throughout world folklores that have this sort of connection to their environment. This is all interpretation, but I think they're trying to tell you something. I think you tell these stories for a reason. It's as if these creatures reach out to you from your subconscious, wearing your shape but smaller, to remind you of what you are. I mentioned Tiffany Aching and her Nakmek-Feegle companions at the start. Well, in one of the books, her little brother is stolen away by a fairy queen. She's a witch, so the Feegles send her out to use her powers to find a way into the fairy queen's world. Once she does, they can be her muscle and help her out. After a while of searching, the solution, Tiffany finds out, isn't some magical witchy dowsing type thing. No, Tiffany realizes that the best way to do this is to read a book about the ailments of sheep out loud as if it were a spell. Sheep are deeply connected to the land she lives on, and by seeing things how the land does, she sees into it. She has to open her eyes, then open her eyes again, and see the world in a different way before she can find the path. And there the entrance is, the way to save her brother. It's no surprise to the Feegles, though. They could see it all along. Remember, they already have that kind of sight. They're tuned in to the land. They're the Chalk Hill Gang. They can cross-step right on through any portal the Chalk has to offer into whatever reality they wish. But they needed her to learn how to do it as well. That's part of what it means to be a witch. You don't just do magic, you do the magic of your land. Over the course of the series, as Tiffany grows, so too does her connection with the world she inhabits. She grows, but she also shrinks. And Pratchett describes this beautifully. This is Tiffany, walking back home. Start with the boots. They are big and heavy boots, much repaired by her father, and they belonged to various sisters before her. Then there's the dress. It has been owned by many sisters as well. It's been taken up, taken out, taken down, and taken in by her mother so many times that it really ought to have been taken away. But Tiffany rather likes it. Then there is Tiffany's face. Light pink with brown eyes and brown hair. Nothing special. Her head might strike anyone watching, in a saucer of black water, for example, as being slightly too big for the rest of her, but perhaps she'll grow into it. Then go farther up and farther until the track becomes a ribbon and Tiffany and her brother 2 little dots. And there is her country. They call it the Chalk, green downlands rolling under the hot summer sun. From up here, the flocks of sheep, moving slowly, drift over the short turf like clouds on a green sky. Here and there, sheepdogs speed over the grass like shooting stars. And then, as the eyes pull back, it is a long green mound lying like a great whale on the world, surrounded by the inky rainwater in the saucer. When you tell or listen to these stories of tiny people protecting their land, cautiously inviting you into it, teaching you how to take mutual ownership of it and let it also take ownership of you, whether you mean to or not, I think you're tapping into something. You become like Tiffany. You see your world made large by their smallness, and the sight of it has a way of shrinking you down too. The self-import falls away, and the things you thought were small begin to feel so much greater than they ever were before. I love that. It never ceases to amaze me how much of yourselves you put into your fiction. It's one of the reasons I love making this show so much. There's so much there, just beneath the surface, if you want to look. And I do. Unfortunately, it's going to be another whole week before our next video comes out here on YouTube. Although, you could go watch it right now if you wanted to. It's actually already online, waiting to be watched, ad-free, over on our streaming platform, Nebula. Actually, we've got a bunch of stuff over there that you won't ever be able to see on YouTube. Entire videos, like this one about a fantasy world that basically has its own gigantic geographic genitalia, or this one about the morphology of angels and why artists are always giving them wings, even though they might not really have had them in the source material. You can find all our videos there a week earlier than they upload on YouTube, plus all of these exclusive videos we only upload to Nebula. And we're not the only ones who have been posting there. The same is true for so many other amazing creators. YouTube is kind of a crazy place to make content. Don't get me wrong, I'm happy to have this platform, but you have to be so careful about your topic choices, your packaging, what you include in your videos. You just start to feel like you're walking on eggshells. Nebula doesn't have any of those concerns. All of the creators there are high quality and trustworthy, which means there are next to no restrictions, and that means we have a lot more freedom to do the things we really want to do. It's honestly so nice, because sometimes you just want to make the video you want to make without worrying about all that other stuff. And here's the really fun part. You can get Nebula for cheaper than almost any other streaming platform on the internet, like less than $1.25 per month. That cheap. We want you to have access to our Nebula content, so we teamed up with another streaming platform called CuriosityStream, who will give you a whole year of Nebula for free when you sign up with them. So basically, 2 streaming services for less than $1.25 a month. And I cannot say enough about how much I love CuriosityStream as its own platform. Quality documentaries are hard to find, but quality documentaries about the things I care about, myths and monsters, literature, the madness of creative minds, yes, this is where I want to be. CuriosityStream has documentaries about everything. I actually just listened to this one about where creativity comes from called Unraveling the Creative Mind, which, as an artist myself, it's just really good to get a feel for how my own head sort of works. Definitely a worthwhile watch. So, here's how to see next week's video right now, get access to all of our exclusive content, all of Nebula, and all of CuriosityStream for less than $1.25 a month. All you have to do is click the link in the description or go to curiositystream.com/TaleFoundry and sign up for 1 year using the code TaleFoundry. That's it. And that first year is only going to be $14.79, which again comes out to less than $1.25 per month. Frankly, I'm not quite sure how they can afford to do this for us, but I'm definitely not complaining. Seriously, take advantage of this offer while it's still going. I don't think any better one exists in the world of streaming. You know, I'm really glad we finally had a chance to discuss this idea, how little people are a way of looking at yourself against the backdrop of your world, allowing yourself to be small. That's how these little ones make me feel anyway. I get so wrapped up in the day-to-day, so focused on my work, I forget how strange and interesting this place is. But when I see all of you exploring it, your little shapes shuffling around in the dark, suddenly I feel less like I'm in the abandoned, ruined old foundry, and more like I'm in some kind of magical mechanical forest. You change the way I see it. You're my little fairy folk, and I love you for it.